Mike Bennett had always thought of himself as a man who lived a straightforward life. But life had a way of shattering illusions when you least expected it. It all started during a conversation with his best friend, Tom. They'd met for drinks at a small pub after work, catching up on life as they often did. "You won't believe what I've been dealing with," Tom said, his voice low and strained. "What's going on?" Mike asked, taking a sip of his beer. Tom hesitated, then leaned in. "I found out my daughter isn't mine." Mike nearly choked on his drink. "What? How's that possible?" Tom explained how he'd overheard a conversation between his wife and her sister that didn't sit right with him. Suspicious, he'd taken a DNA test. The results confirmed his worst fears: his 5-year-old daughter wasn't biologically his. "I feel like my whole life's been a lie," Tom admitted, his hands gripping his glass. "I trusted her, Mike. I trusted her with everything." Mike shook his head, stunned. "I can't imagine what you're going through." "It's hell," Tom said bitterly. "But you know what? I'd rather know the truth than live a lie." That conversation stayed with Mike long after he left the pub. He couldn't shake the image of Tom's devastated face or the idea that someone you trusted completely could betray you so profoundly. At first, Mike told himself it was just an isolated case, a tragic story that had nothing to do with his own life. But as the days went on, the seed of doubt began to grow. He started replaying moments from the past, small things he'd never questioned before. Jack's features were slightly different from his own. While Mia had his brown eyes and Emma's wavy hair, Jack had striking blue eyes and straight blonde hair, traits that didn't match anyone in Mike's immediate family. He'd always assumed Jack took after Emma's distant relatives, but now he couldn't be sure. The more he thought about it, the more uneasy he felt. He tried to push the thoughts aside, but they lingered like a shadow, creeping into his mind at unexpected moments. One evening, after the kids were in bed, Mike sat in the living room, staring at his laptop. He had typed "at-home DNA test" into the search bar but hesitated to click on any of the results. "Am I really doing this?" he muttered to himself. The thought of questioning Jack's paternity made him feel sick. But Tom's words echoed in his mind: "I'd rather know the truth than live a lie." Finally, he clicked on a reputable website and ordered the test. It arrived a few days later, and Mike carefully followed the instructions, swabbing his cheek and discreetly collecting a sample from Jack during breakfast. He sent the samples off with trembling hands, telling himself he was being paranoid and that everything would come back fine. The results. 2 weeks later, the email arrived. Mike's heart pounded as he clicked it open, his hands clammy and his throat dry. The results were clear: he was not Jack's biological father. Mike stared at the screen, his world collapsing around him. The words blurred as tears filled his eyes. He felt like the ground had been ripped out from under him, leaving him free-falling into an abyss of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak. "Impossible," he whispered, though the evidence was right in front of him. Emma had lied to him. She had carried another man's child and let Mike believe it was his. A storm of emotions. Mike spent the rest of the day in a haze, going through the motions at work without really processing anything. His co-workers noticed his distracted demeanor, but he brushed off their concerns, claiming he was just tired. That evening, after the kids were asleep, he confronted Emma. "We need to talk," he said, his voice cold and clipped. Emma looked up from her book, sensing the tension. "What's wrong?" Mike pulled out his phone and showed her the email. "Explain this." Emma's face went pale as she read the results. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. "I trusted you," Mike said, his voice rising. "I trusted you with everything, and this is what you do? You let me think Jack was mine for 4 years?" Tears streamed down Emma's face. "Mike, I can explain." "I don't want excuses," he snapped. "I want the truth." "Who's his father?" Emma hesitated, then whispered, "It was a mistake. It was one night, years ago, before we found out I was pregnant. I didn't know for sure, Mike. I hoped." "You hoped?" Mike repeated bitterly. "You hoped I'd never find out. That's not hope, that's lying. That's betrayal." Emma sobbed, but Mike felt no sympathy. Work troubles. The timing of the revelation couldn't have been worse. Mike's job was already demanding, with a major project nearing its deadline and tensions running high in the office. His manager had been on his case about productivity, and now, with his personal life in turmoil, Mike found it nearly impossible to focus. During a team meeting, Mike's manager, Laura, noticed his distracted demeanor. "Mike, are you with us?" she asked sharply. "Yeah, sorry," he mumbled, though he had no idea what had been discussed. After the meeting, Laura pulled him aside. "You've been off lately," she said. "Is everything okay?" Mike hesitated, then nodded. "I'm just dealing with some personal stuff. It won't affect my work." But it did. His performance slipped, deadlines were missed, and co-workers began picking up the slack. Mike felt like he was drowning, his personal and professional lives collapsing under the weight of his emotions. The plan for revenge. As the days turned into weeks, Mike's anger hardened into resolve. He couldn't let Emma get away with what she had done. She needed to face the consequences of her betrayal, not just for him, but for Jack and their family. He began to plan his revenge, carefully considering his next steps. First, he consulted a lawyer to understand his rights regarding custody and divorce. While he loved Mia and Jack deeply, he wasn't sure he could stay in the same house with Emma. Second, he started documenting everything: copies of the DNA test results, screenshots of texts Emma had sent during her confession, and records of her behavior over the years. Finally, Mike began distancing himself emotionally from Emma. He stopped sharing details about his day, avoided unnecessary conversations, and made it clear that their relationship was hanging by a thread. Living with the betrayal. The atmosphere in the Bennett household was suffocating. Mike's cold silence was unbearable, and Emma, consumed by guilt, tiptoed around him, trying to keep the household running as normally as possible for the kids. But it was clear that things were far from normal. Mia and Jack noticed the tension. Mia, perceptive for her age, asked questions. "Why aren't you and Mommy talking as much?" she asked one evening while helping Mike set the table. Mike hesitated, forcing a smile. "Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements, sweetheart. But we both love you and your brother, no matter what." Jack, oblivious to the turmoil, remained his cheerful self, climbing onto Mike's lap during story time and begging for piggyback rides. Each moment of innocence was a dagger to Mike's heart, a reminder of what had been taken from him. Revenge begins. Mike's anger festered, growing darker with each passing day. He couldn't just move on, he needed Emma to feel the pain she had caused him. Quietly, methodically, he began putting his plan into motion. Financial separation. Mike opened a private bank account and began transferring small amounts of money from their joint savings into it. He didn't intend to leave Emma penniless, but he wanted to ensure he had control over his finances if things escalated to a divorce. Social isolation. Mike started sharing the truth about Emma's betrayal with their closest friends and family. At first, he felt hesitant, airing their dirty laundry felt wrong, but the support and validation he received bolstered him. Emma's once strong social circle began to crumble as people learned the truth. Workplace consequences. Mike discovered that Emma had mentioned her affair partner's name during her teary confession, a coworker from her old job, before she joined her current firm. With some sleuthing, Mike contacted the man anonymously, letting him know about the DNA test and how Emma's actions had shattered their family. The affair partner, now married with kids of his own, panicked. Mike didn't stop there. He sent an anonymous email to the HR department of Emma's former job, detailing her inappropriate behavior. The breaking point at work. Mike's troubles at work were coming to a head. His manager, Laura, called him into her office one afternoon. "Mike, I know you're dealing with personal issues, but your performance has been slipping for weeks," she said. "We're nearing the deadline for the Lockridge project, and the team needs you at full capacity." "I understand," Mike said, his voice tight. "I'll get it together." Laura sighed. "I hope so. If things don't improve, we may need to discuss your role here." The pressure was overwhelming. Mike felt like he was being crushed from all sides, at home, at work, and in his own mind. One evening, after another tense day, Mike finally snapped. Emma had prepared dinner, setting the table with meticulous care, as if the act of cooking could bridge the chasm between them. "Can we talk?" Emma asked cautiously as they sat down. Mike put down his fork, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, now you want to talk. What about, Emma? About how you lied to me for years? Or how you let me think Jack was mine while carrying another man's child?" Emma flinched. "Mike, I know I hurt you, but we need to move forward, for the kids." "For the kids?" Mike barked, his anger boiling over. "You mean the kids you let me believe were mine while you played house? You destroyed this family, Emma. Don't act like you're doing this for them." Tears streamed down Emma's face. "I made a mistake, a horrible mistake. But I love you, Mike. I always have." Mike stood, his hands clenched into fists. "You don't destroy someone you love, Emma. You don't let them live a lie for years. Love? This isn't love." He stormed out of the room, leaving Emma sobbing at the table. A shocking discovery. Mike's revenge plan took an unexpected turn when Linda, the private investigator he'd hired to uncover more about Emma's affair, came back with additional information. "I looked into the man Emma mentioned," Linda said during a call. "He wasn't just a coworker. They were involved for nearly a year before she got pregnant." Mike's breath caught. "A year?" "Yes," Linda confirmed. "And based on the timeline, it's likely she knew Jack wasn't yours from the beginning." The revelation hit Mike like a sledgehammer. Emma hadn't just made a mistake, she had deliberately lied to him, stringing him along while building their life on a foundation of deceit. At work, Mike's stress finally reached its peak. The Lockridge project was falling behind, and Laura was running out of patience. During a critical presentation to a major client, Mike froze. His thoughts were consumed by Emma's betrayal, and he stumbled over his words, losing the client's confidence. After the meeting, Laura pulled him aside. "Mike, this can't continue," she said firmly. "We need someone who can focus on the job. Take some time off. Get your life together." Mike nodded numbly. He had been put on unpaid leave, a professional blow that only deepened his sense of failure. Emma, too, was facing the consequences of her actions. Word of the affair had reached her workplace, and her co-workers treated her with thinly veiled disdain. She overheard whispers in the break room and noticed the way conversations stopped when she entered a room. One day, her manager called her into his office. "Emma, we've received complaints about a personal matter that's affecting the team's dynamic," he said. "While we value your contributions, we believe it's best if we part ways." Emma was stunned. She had lost her job, her reputation, and the respect of everyone around her. Mike's revenge peaks. Mike's cold, calculated plan to make Emma face the full weight of her betrayal reached its crescendo. By this point, Emma had lost her job, her social circle was in tatters, and her family life was unraveling. But Mike wasn't done. He wanted her to feel the isolation and helplessness she had thrust upon him. Legal action. Mike moved forward with a legal strategy to ensure he wouldn't be financially obligated to support Jack. With the DNA test results as evidence, he filed a motion to disestablish paternity. During a tense meeting with their respective lawyers, Emma broke down. "Mike, please don't do this. Jack sees you as his father, don't abandon him." "I didn't abandon him," Mike replied coldly. "You lied to me, Emma. You made me believe he was mine. That's on you." The court ruled in Mike's favor, relieving him of child support for Jack. While it was a legal victory, it left him feeling hollow. Jack, after all, was an innocent child caught in the middle of Emma's deceit. Social humiliation. Mike subtly let the truth slip to more people in their shared social circle. Friends who had once admired Emma now avoided her, unable to reconcile her betrayal with the image they'd had of her as a loving wife and mother. At a neighborhood barbecue, Mike overheard a heated conversation between two former friends of Emma's. "I can't believe she did that to him," one said. "Yeah, and poor Jack," the other replied. "She's lucky Mike hasn't completely walked away." Emma overheard the conversation too and quickly left the party, her face red with shame. Despite Mike's best efforts to shield Mia and Jack from the fallout, the tension in the house took its toll. Mia grew quieter, often retreating to her room to draw or read, while Jack became clingy, sensing the discord between his parents. One evening, Mia approached Mike as he was tucking her into bed. "Daddy, are you and Mommy going to get a divorce?" she asked, her voice trembling. Mike's heart sank. "Why do you ask that, sweetheart?" "You're always mad at her," Mia said. "And she cries a lot when you're not around." Mike hesitated. "Mommy and I are having some problems," he said carefully. "But no matter what happens, we both love you and Jack very much. That will never change." Mia nodded, but her worried expression lingered. A chance encounter. One day, while running errands, Mike bumped into Linda, the private investigator. "Hey, Mike," Linda said, smiling sympathetically. "How are you holding up?" "Honestly? It's been a nightmare," Mike admitted. "But I'm getting through it." Linda paused, then offered a suggestion. "Have you thought about counseling? Not for your marriage, but for yourself? You've been through a lot. It might help." Mike hadn't considered therapy before, but Linda's words stuck with him. That night, he searched online for therapists in the area and booked his first appointment. Emma hits rock bottom. With her social life in shambles and her career derailed, Emma sank into depression. She spent her days at home, barely able to muster the energy to care for the kids. The once confident, vibrant woman Mike had fallen in love with was now a shadow of herself. One evening, she tried to talk to Mike. "I know I've hurt you," she said, her voice trembling. "But I'm still here, trying to fix this. Doesn't that count for something?" Mike looked at her, his expression unreadable. "You didn't care about fixing things when you were sneaking around with him. You made your choices, Emma. Now you're living with them." Emma broke down, sobbing. But Mike felt nothing. Therapy became a lifeline for Mike. In his sessions, he unpacked the betrayal, the anger, and the pain he had been carrying. His therapist encouraged him to focus on what he could control, his relationship with Mia and Jack, his career, and his own emotional well-being. "You can't change what happened," the therapist said during one session. "But you can decide how you want to move forward. What kind of life do you want for yourself and your kids?" The question stuck with Mike. A difficult decision. After months of separation and mounting tension, Mike made the decision to file for divorce. He broke the news to Emma one evening after the kids were asleep. "This isn't working," he said firmly. "I've tried, but I can't get past what you've done. I'm filing for divorce." Emma's face crumpled. "Mike, please don't do this. I love you. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this." "It's too late," Mike replied. "I can't keep living like this. And neither can you." The divorce proceedings were grueling, with arguments over custody, finances, and how to explain the situation to the kids. In the end, they agreed to joint custody, with Mike retaining the house. A year after the divorce was finalized, Mike began to rebuild his life. He reconnected with friends, focused on his career, and strengthened his bond with Mia and Jack. He even started dating again, though he approached new relationships cautiously. Emma, meanwhile, struggled to piece her life back together. She moved into a small apartment and worked a series of low-paying jobs to make ends meet. Her relationship with her children remained strained, especially with Jack, who sensed the tension between his parents but didn't fully understand it. In time, Mike found peace, not through revenge, but by creating a new life for himself and his kids. Years later, Mike would look back on the betrayal as a turning point in his life. While the pain of Emma's actions never fully disappeared, it taught him the importance of resilience, self-respect, and the strength to move forward. Emma, meanwhile, carried the weight of her choices, knowing that she had destroyed the life they had built together.